Hello, in this video we are going to be taking a closer look at blood. So we'll start by introducing a few characteristics of blood, talk about what the functions of blood are, go into the composition of blood, and then talk about blood plasma, the formed elements, and specifically red blood cells. So first of all, blood characteristics, it tends to be a little bit alkaline in pH, meaning it's slightly above neutral. So pH is between 7.35 and 7.45 in pH. So this is going to be just slightly above neutral of 7. Typical red blood cell count. So in females, you have about 4.2 to 5.4 million cells per microliter. In males, this is slightly elevated. And the average volume in healthy adults, females tend to be 4 to 5 liters, and males with our generally larger body are going to be about 5 to 6 liters. Overall, a few other characteristics of blood. So you probably know that it is sticky and opaque. It has a characteristic metallic taste if you were to taste it. Because it has a lot of electrolytes and salts in it, you can taste the saltiness if you ever have a sucking on your blood. The color of blood is always going to be red, whether it is oxygen rich or oxygen poor, but it is going to be more of a scarlet color when it's oxygen rich and a darker red when it's poor. It's more dense than water and about 5 times more viscous, largely because of the formed elements. Formed elements are going to be things like your red blood cells, your platelets. We'll talk about those later. The blood is going to account for about 8% of the body weight, and the average volume, so the volume that it counts for is going to have a significant contribution to your overall mass. The functions of blood. So blood, you may be aware that it carries oxygen in the red blood cells as it is attached to hemoglobin. It's also going to carry metabolic waste, most of them going to the kidneys to be secreted into the urine and gotten rid of that way. And then nutrients such as glucose are going to be transported in the blood. The blood is also going to play an important function in homeostasis and maintaining certain physiological parameters. So it helps maintain pH as a part of the bicarbonate blood buffering system, and the proteins in the blood, they are going to help keep the pH stable. Electrolytes and fluid balance. So this is going to help determine where water goes. Blood helps with that. And body temperature. So blood can either be transported to the surface and be filtered into sweat, which can then evaporate to cool your body, or if you're trying to stay warm, the blood vessels can constrict and keep the blood closer to your core to help maintain that body temperature. In addition, it will protect your body, so it has a mechanism for clotting that's going to help prevent blood loss. Since it's carrying all these things, you need to make sure that you have an adequate supply of blood to maintain these properties. It's also going to help prevent infections as a part of the immune system, carrying immune cells and immune molecules throughout the body. So blood is going to be made up of primarily 3 major components. So you have the plasma, you have the buffy coat, and you have the erythrocytes. Erythrocytes, also known as red blood cells. Plasma is going to account for generally slightly over half of the volume, with water, proteins, nutrients, and other soluble components dissolved within the water itself. The buffy coat is going to be where you find your white blood cells or leukocytes and your platelets. And then your red blood cells, your white blood cells, platelets, these are all things that are either cells or derived from cells. We'll see that platelets and red blood cells are not true cells because really they lack a nucleus and therefore don't fit the true definition of a cell, but they are derived from cells that have undergone changes and therefore are considered part of the four formed elements. Now, if you were to take blood and spin it down in a centrifuge, it separates into these different components. So you can see the plasma is going to be the least dense, goes on top. Then you have the buffy coat, and then the erythrocytes is the most dense. The percentage of red blood cells that make up your blood volume is reported as your hematocrit. And so for females, your hematocrit generally is going to be around 37 to 47%, while in males it's from 42 to 52%. When you have a decreased or depressed hematocrit, you're considered anemic. And when you have an elevated hematocrit, it's called polycythemia. So we are going to now take a closer look at the blood plasma. So blood plasma is going to consist of water, the electrolytes, plasma proteins, nitrogenous containing substances, or nitrogen containing substances, different nutrients, gases, and hormones. Water accounts for 90% of the plasma volume, with the other things being dissolved in it accounting for the other 10% of the plasma volume. Electrolytes, major ones are going to include sodium, potassium, calcium, magnesium. Negatively charged electrolytes include chloride ions, phosphates, sulfates, and bicarbonate ions. Three major plasma proteins. You have the albumin, the globulins, and the fibrinogen. The nitrogen-containing substances are largely going to be products of cellular metabolism. So here you have urea, uric acid, creatinine, and ammonium salts. Nutrients, things like glucose, amino acids, fatty acids, glycerol, triglycerides, cholesterols, and vitamins. Gases, the two major ones being oxygen and carbon dioxide. And then hormones. The hormones will be dissolved if they are water soluble. Certain non-water soluble hormones, such as the steroid and thyroid hormones, are actually going to be carried by plasma proteins within the blood. So the plasma proteins, albumin is going to be significant because it's going to be the main contributor to osmotic pressure. It accounts for 60% of the plasma proteins, is produced by the liver as well. The globulins account for 36% of plasma protein. You have alpha and beta, which are made by the liver, are going to help transport proteins that bind lipids, ions, and fat-soluble vitamins. And then you have gamma globulins, which are also referred to as antibodies. These are going to be released by plasma cells during an immune response. And then finally, you have fibrinogen. This is made by the liver. It is going to be about 4% of the plasma proteins and is going to be responsible for forming fibrin during a blood clot, which is going to be an important component of the blood clot. All right, if we look at the formed elements, you are going to see that erythrocytes are going to be the most abundant. Leukocytes and platelets are less abundant. Only the leukocytes are considered complete cells. Most of the formed elements are going to survive in the blood for a few days. However, some of them can stay for an extended period of time, especially memory leukocytes, immune cells. Erythrocytes vastly outnumber the other types of formed elements. And we're going to talk about each of these individually, starting with the erythrocytes. So erythrocytes, these are not a true cell because they are anucleates, so they lack a nucleus. In fact, they lack most organelles. They get rid of things like their mitochondria, meaning that the metabolism is going to be mostly through glycolysis. All of this is to help make room for the hemoglobin that the red blood cells are going to form. Really, the rest of the proteins are mainly there to help maintain shape or deal with the oxygen radicals that could potentially form. They are efficient oxygen transporters. So it has a concave shape. This increases the surface area so that a spherical cell would have about 30% less surface area. This increased surface area is important because this is where you're going to have gas exchange at the surface of the cells. The erythrocytes lack a mitochondria, which, if you know what mitochondria do, they are going to perform aerobic respiration, which would consume the oxygen that the red blood cells are trying to transport. So they get rid of the mitochondria so that you don't have to, or so that they're not consuming it. Hemoglobin is the major protein found within the red blood cells. When it carries oxygen, it's considered oxyhemoglobin. Because it is going to be made up of multiple units, each carrying a heme group. Each heme carries an oxygen, so you're going to have 4 oxygen molecules per hemoglobin. Oxygen is going to be released in tissues where hemoglobin gets reduced to deoxyhemoglobin, making it dark red. While oxygen is going to be important for carrying, or while hemoglobin is important for carrying oxygen, it also has a function of carrying carbon dioxide back to the lungs for expelling it. When it binds to carbon dioxide, it forms carbaminohemoglobin. So this is a way that you get rid of about 20% of the hemoglobin in your blood. Red blood cells are formed through the process of hematopoiesis, specifically erythropoiesis. So hematopoiesis is the general term that's referring to all formation of all the blood cells. Hematopoiesis is occurring in the red blood cell, or occurring in the bone marrow, the red bone marrow specifically. All right, so hematopoiesis is going to start with the hematopoietic stem cell, also known as a hemocytoblast. This is undifferentiated. When it divides, it can form a cell that will continue to be present as a hemocytoblast, so it maintains that population. But another cell, another daughter cell, can differentiate and ultimately give rise to either the myeloid stem cell or the lymphoid stem cell. We'll talk about both of these in a while, but the myeloid stem cell is going to be the population that ultimately gives rise to red blood cells. So erythropoiesis is going to start with the myeloid stem cell. Red blood cell production occurs in 3 different phases. So phase 1 involves the synthesis of ribosomes. This is going to be so that you have plenty of proteins for making, or plenty of components for making the protein, specifically the hemoglobin that's going to be found in them. Once you have the ribosomes, you start accumulating hemoglobin, and then finally you're going to have ejection of the nucleus. So during these first 2 phases, it's referred to a proerythroblast. Then once you have ejection of the nucleus, it's referred to as a reticulocyte. The reticulocyte then is going to go into the blood, where it counts for about 1 to 2% of the red blood cells. The reticulocyte is going to further mature into the erythrocyte within the blood. In order for erythropoiesis to occur, you do need certain components. So nutrients like amino acids, lipids, and carbohydrates need to be sufficiently present. Two vitamins that are especially important are folate and vitamin B12. These are important because they're needed for DNA synthesis. Iron is an essential mineral that you need for hemoglobin. The iron that your body has is going to be stored as ferritin, and in blood it is going to be transported as transferrin. So you have iron. You typically don't have free iron just floating in your blood, but it's going to be a component of some protein, either bound to ferritin, transferrin, or hemoglobin, or some other protein. So what regulates erythropoiesis? Well, because you are trying to maintain adequate levels of oxygenation of the blood, you're going to go through a process where you experience low oxygen. If you experience low oxygen, that's known as hypoxia. That's going to stimulate your kidneys to start releasing erythropoietin. Erythropoietin stimulates the red blood cell or the red bone marrow to produce red blood cells. This increases the number of red blood cells that are formed, which then is going to cause the oxygen carrying capacity to rise, and then you have homeostasis restored. The red blood cell life cycle, so typically erythrocytes are only going to persist for about 120 days. The damaged red blood cells and older red blood cells are going to be consumed by macrophages, typically in the spleen, but also the liver and the bone marrow. Hemoglobin then gets broken down and recycled. So the protein is going to be recycled into amino acids. Iron is going to be bound to transferrin and stored as ferritin. And the heme groups are going to be broken down to biliverdin for blood transport, and ultimately will go to the liver and be converted into bilirubin. So a couple of homeostatic imbalances that are associated with the blood. One is anemia. So this is when your blood's oxygen carrying capacity is too low, that normal metabolism is not going to be regulated. Typically, it's a sign of an underlying disorder. Common symptoms includes fatigue, pallor or paleness, shortness of breath, and the feeling of being chilled. So major causes include blood loss. When it's due to a loss of blood, this is known as hemorrhagic anemia. It can be caused by a deficiency in red blood cell production. So a number of things can cause this. So iron deficiency is one. This is going to produce smaller than normal red blood cells, which are known as microcytes. Pernicious anemia, which is a form when you are low in vitamin B12. Those are going to produce macrocytes. Renal, if for some reason you have kidney damage or kidneys are not functioning properly, they can't produce EPO, and so you have less EPO production. And aplastic, so this is going to be bone marrow destruction. So this oftentimes can be a result of treatment with for cancers because it's going to kill off fast dividing cells, which are going to be found in red or in the red bone marrow. So macrocytosis, you can see fewer cells that tend to be larger. So a sign of pernicious anemia because you can't have as many red blood cells being produced because they're being made, although they lack DNA, they're originally derived from something that has DNA. So the cells end up being larger to help compensate for that. Iron deficiency, you can see the cells are paler. There tends to be fewer of them, so you don't have as many. They're not going to be slightly enlarged like they normally would be, because you're lacking the components to actually build the components of the blood cells. So you have microcytes, ones that are actually slightly normal or slightly smaller than normal. Red blood cell destruction is another cause of anemia. So this can be hemolytic, where this happens with incompatible blood types. So if you get a blood transfusion, your immune cells will start breaking down the blood cells that come in, and because they don't match, and so you have hemolysis. Thalassemia is another type, and then you may have heard of sickle cell anemia. So this is due to a mutation that results in sickle cell shaped red blood cells, which are not going to be as efficient at transporting blood cells, and are also going to have the problem of getting stuck in blood vessels. So typically you're going to have blood transfusions, although there has been some genetically modified, some recent advances in genetically engineered cells, replacing those so that you don't have red blood cells that have that sickle cell trait. All right, the other side of the scale is polycythemia. This is when you have an abnormal elevated level of red blood cells. So here you can see much more denser. The color here is really not illustrative of what's going on. It's really that you just have a higher density of them. This increases blood viscosity, causing the blood to flow more sluggishly. Notable types include polycythemia vera. This is a bone marrow cancer that causes uncontrolled red blood cell production. Symptoms include dizziness, having a hematocrit of 80%. Blood volume can double, leading to engorged blood vessels and severely impairing circulation. You can also have secondary polycythemia, which is more of a physiological response. This is going to occur when less oxygen is available than normal. Say you go up to altitude. So EPO levels are going to start rising, and therefore the level of red blood cells will increase. All right, that does it for this introductory part of blood. The next lecture, we will be talking about the white blood cells and platelets, and then some of the other processes that blood is involved in. So I'll see you next time.